Franchising is the most misunderstood and most overlooked form of entrepreneurship. We're here to educate you and help you find the entrepreneur within. Franchising is not all about the French fries.
We find that individuals who are exploring business ownership tend to have a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings about the franchise industry. So what we want to do is help prospective business owners make confident and educated decisions before moving forward or not moving forward with a business. Welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
Hi, welcome to episode 29 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. I'm Roxanne Rapske, and this is my colleague, Sara Waskow. We created this podcast to bring you education and information about entrepreneurship and all things franchising. Today, our guest is Chris King. He is a performance coach, an entrepreneur, and an author. I've got his book here. It's called Renegotiate Your Existence, Unlock Your Impossible Life, with emphasis on possible. So, Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you. You do a lot of work around mindset and clearing out the cobwebs, so to speak, to get through a lot of breakthrough work. But before we get into that and how that applies to making changes in your life, kind of give us the rundown of how this all came to be, how you got started, some of the really hard left and right turns you took before starting your business 9 years ago.
Wow. Okay. I was like anybody else. I was doing the corporate thing and working along the path. And one day I recognized I was just so far out of alignment with who I am and how I want to live that I needed to create a pivot for myself. I didn't expect that was going to happen. And I certainly couldn't have predicted the, I want to say the violent nature of it, because I went from what was a pretty safe kind of gig into the entertainment industry, which was very low paying and very unstable. And the chances of success were incredibly low. So, but that sort of taught me that, you can do the impossible. You just need to understand how to get out of your own way and how to get your physiology and your psychology working for you instead of against you.
Reading your book, I kind of feel like you're more of a therapist than, I can see how coaching and therapy kind of go hand in hand. But so you did the corporate thing, you left corporate, you became you went to work on a radio station, actually became a disc jockey, right?
Yeah. I was on the air. I sent a joke. I was working in my office one day, in my home office in Orange County, and I sent what I call a joke grenade to Ryan Seacrest, and he's in the studios in Burbank, which is not too far from where I live. And they emailed me back, to my surprise, because it was just, a joke grenade, you throw it out and forget about it kind of thing. Well, they emailed me back. Long story short, they created a month-long bit around the joke that I had sent them. And they had me in the studio one day with Ryan and his co-host at the time. And when I got home that night, everything, just to the core, to the fabric of my being, was like, I'm in the wrong life. Like, I'm in the wrong job, I'm in the wrong town, I'm in the wrong apartment. Everything was wrong. And I knew exactly what I needed to do, which was difficult because radio, as I mentioned, it was very low paying. It was highly unstable. The chances of getting a gig are very low. And I had a life that required a 6-figure income. And so I threw it in the garbage can and went after a dream.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a hard turn. So then through this process, you end up working at a hospital and writing articles for doctors and learning about the biology of the brain, right?
Yeah. As fun as radio was, I was born and raised on the beach in Santa Monica, so I'm not comfortable being broke. So and my credit went to crap, and I pretty much lost everything. And so after a decade of struggling, I thought, maybe I need to get a grown-up job again. And so I had an in at a hospital here in Southern California, ended up working in the Neuroscience Institute. And I wasn't clinical. I didn't have a background. The closest I got to anything anything even remotely related to healthcare was my mother working for the Red Cross in disaster services, right? But I kind of got an accidental education in neurobiology because I started writing papers and doing presentations and working with the physicians because they're not the greatest presenters. And I would even write articles for some of the stuff that would be attributed to the physicians because physicians are only going to read things that other physicians wrote. So I would do all the research and write it, get the physician to sign it, and they would get it attributed to them. But that's how I kind of stumbled forward in that life.
I'm confused though. You went from a corporate job to a disc jockey. So how did you get that gig? And then you left, you weren't making enough money, and that all makes sense. But then to end up in a hospital, I mean, we talk with clients a lot about not having to have experience when they start a franchise, but these are very drastic turn. So I need a little more help understanding how you went. I can kind of see how you could go from corporate to a disc jockey, but from disc jockey to writing these articles for doctors, like how did you get in? I'm sorry, how'd you get that job? I'm just
Well, like I said, I had an in at the hospital that knew I had a marketing background, and so that helped, right? But there were a few times in my life when I wanted something so bad. It was like I had just bent the universe to my will. And I understood what real commitment looked like, what real focus looked like, what an attitude of no quit no matter what looked like. It's more than commitment, it's true resolve. And ultimately the unfolding of reality, as we are experiencing it right now, it's a process. It's a system. And any system can be hacked and bent and changed if you understand how that system works. Now, I didn't know this consciously at the time. It was just stuff I figured out as I stumbled through my life. But ultimately, this is exactly how you can make the impossible a reality. It has to do with, it all starts right up here in your mind.
And in the mix of all this, you ended up getting a certificate in spiritual psychology as well. So a lot of study around the brain.
I was never a school guy, so I never finished a 4-year degree. I somehow accidentally got an associate's degree in liberal arts. I still don't know what that is. But
did you say literal arts?
Literal arts, whatever liberal arts are. I think this would be it's like general education. I don't know. I really don't know.
Liberal arts. Okay. Yes.
But I got that from a junior college and flamed out because school was just not for me. And just too many rules. I'm a color outside the box kind of guy. I mean, when I was a kid, my teachers consistently said that I was disruptive, and I couldn't agree more, because that really is the crux of what we do, in my organization and the process that we go through. It's very disruptive, because that's how we're going to change things. So
that started at a young age. That disruption was from childhood that you recognized. Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting as I track back through my history, how I seem to be, part of it is a really dysfunctional upbringing in psychology. Of course, I guess that implies there's another kind, but the other is maybe wiring. Just I seem to be wired a certain way.
It's interesting how those traits as a child, I'm going to use the analogy that you shared in the book with, for those of you that are old enough to know who David Lee Roth is. But it was interesting about him being a child and everyone wanting his parents to put him on Ritalin because of his activity level. And he ended up being this amazing entertainer, right? And using that to his advantage. So,
Yeah. Instead of drugging him and instead of suggesting that he was somehow broken or something needed to be fixed, they did what we call in my world a reframe. Right. So they said, okay, and instead, so he'd get all hopped up and goofing around as his blood sugar would get up. And instead of drugging him and numbing him out, they just said, his parents would say, oh, David's just doing monkey hour. And David said, I turned monkey hour into a career. And that's exactly one of the things that we look at in our organization, is that everything about you is a gift. There's nothing about you that's broken or screwed up or wrong. Those are simply misidentifications. And if you understand this thing about me that I may not even like is in fact a gift, then I can ask the question, how might that be true? And I can put it into service in some way that aligns for me.
I love that. Instead of drugging up and kind of covering up some trait that might be perceived as negative, really learning how to use that to your advantage, how to benefit from it, and how to, like David Lee Roth, make a career out of it in some way, Well,
and I think society and people's beliefs put a lot of stuff on us. And I think a lot of this relates to people that are going through our process, which we're going to get into. But, there's so many times people will share with someone that they're thinking about starting a business, or they're looking at businesses, or they're working with us. And then you get all those people that have all these comments and, just kind of like poo-poo it. And then it's just people put their stuff on you. And regardless if you're overactive or you're trying to get out of corporate, like, why would you leave? We had a founder of a franchise on a while back, and everyone thought she was crazy to leave her 6-figure Microsoft job and go off and start this business. Probably like a lot of people thought you were crazy when you left your 6-figure marketing corporate job to go be a disc jockey. So now
I thought I was crazy.
So now 9 years ago, you launched your business. And tell us a little bit.
That was another crazy one. I got fired from a job. I left the hospital and I went to work for another tech company, because that was my upbringing, my background, and I liked tech. Ultimately, it was not a good fit for me, and that lasted for about 9 months, and I got fired. And there was a guy in my network at the time that, when I first met him, which was only maybe 6 months before, he said, "Man, I wish you worked for me." I guess he really liked me, and I called him. Right? Because I just got fired. I was like, well, remember when you said that? And he did commercial real estate. And so I went down and I met with him again. And, he kind of took me through his office. And I left there thinking, I can make a lot of money. I can make a really good living here. And then what? Right? I sort of projected forward 2 years from now. I'm now in a really good career with a really good lifestyle, with a requirement, like an income requirement to support that lifestyle. And I'm working in a job that, again, it's fine. It's good. But I don't do well with mediocre. I don't do well with fine. I don't do well with good. I need more than that. And so my options were take this job with this guy and be safe and secure, or go out and do my own thing and risk being broke and homeless forever. And at the time I had no physical address. I had a beat up car, and everything I owned was in it. And I decided, instead of taking the safe route, I would do something that meant something to me.
Wow.
So yeah, of all the crazy bets I've ever made, it turned out the safest one was on me.
Okay, that just gave me goosebumps.
What a great quote. Of all the bets I've ever made, the safest one was on me. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Of all the crazy bets I've ever made, that was the safest one.
I like
also
that.
Had the highest return on investment, because I'm pretty proud of myself. Look, I look back, I go, that was dumb. Like that is not the smart thing. That's not the practical thing. Right. But in my organization, it's Status Flow, the book, all of it is like, we don't do practical. Don't bring me practical. Bring me absurd, ridiculous. Bring me fantastic, spectacular, impossible. That's what we're going to do.
So tell us a little bit about what your organization does.
Well, I now do for, we now do, there's a team of us, that we now do for other people what I was able to do for myself. People that are living the fine life, the good life. It's like, okay, this is good. How are you? I'm good. How's the family? Oh, they're fine. Everything's fine. But there's no charge in that, right? Is that really living? Are you living your best life? Back in my single days, I would laugh at like the online dating profile and everything and say, I'm living life to the fullest. Are you? Are you really? Really?
So how'd those first dates go when you asked that question?
I am not, well, I'm not wired to be in a relationship. I mean, my girlfriend and I are basically saving two other people. That's really how that works.
That's awesome.
So
It's
you're
awesome you
welcome
found
to
that
those
person,
two,
Chris.
whoever and wherever you are.
Oh, a lot of people can probably relate to that too. I know.
Look, that's part of my magic, right? Is that, and I understand this about myself, is I am seriously screwed up, like psychologically. I know how dysfunctional I am. I'm probably a borderline sociopath. I mean, I'm really messed up. And I get it, right? I understand how to work with that. And even one of my clients said, Chris, what I love about you is that you don't come from on high. You're not like, oh, I got it all figured out. You're in this every single day, and I do that with every aspect of my life. I mean, I've done the rage, I've done the addiction, I've done the homeless thing, I've done it all, so I get it.
So with that said, I want to talk about one of the biggest things that I would say, or the biggest challenges our clients have, is what we call head trash. It's their own stuff, I think, a lot of times, which really is fear that leads them to not have that dream that they want. They want to get out of mediocre. They want to get out of fine. They want to get out of good, but they can't do it.
Or they don't think they can.
They don't think they can. So what are some things you would say to these people that struggle with that?
Well, we're all about tools. And so the two tools that I will offer for fear in particular are, number one, you got to understand what fear is and how to leverage it. And number two, a massive helping of personal responsibility. Fear comes from a belief system, right? Everybody has an operating system in their head, just like a phone or a computer has an operating system. So does a human. We call it a belief system. And that's where your fear is coming from. Everything you believe is a choice, right? Your beliefs are choices that you have not taken responsibility for. And when you take full responsibility for your choices, for those beliefs, you get to believe whatever you want. And if you're going to achieve the impossible, if you're going to achieve your goals, you don't have the luxury of making choices, right? Selecting beliefs that do not align with the outcome, right? So through the lens of personal responsibility, whether or not you believe you're good enough, or you deserve it, or you can, these are all choices. And so when I work with a client, I say, look at the belief here. This is the belief that you're telling me you have. Is that aligned or misaligned with the outcome? It's misaligned. Great. Then you have a different choice you need to make. It's that simple. It's not easy. It is very simple. Now, the other piece that I'll offer is that you got to understand what fear is. Fear and excitement, through the lens of neurobiology and physiology, are the exact same thing. Your body and your brain do not know the difference between fear and enthusiasm. So there's a chemical in the brain called norepinephrine, and that's what's kicking when you're afraid of something, right? It's a focusing chemical. Okay, so if you're walking through the woods and you see a bear, norepinephrine is gonna, you're gonna forget the birds and the trees and all the pretty things. All you're gonna focus on is the bear. That's more norepinephrine focusing you. It speeds up muscle reaction. Sometimes it's called noradrenaline, so you can think of it that way too. But when you're excited about something, it's the exact same neurochemical cocktail. So if you can, instead of focusing on the doom and gloom negative thing, oh no, I'm going to be broken homeless, I've been there, done that. You focus on what you want, the excitement, right? Like, ooh, like I'm going to take my eye off broken homeless, put my eye on the ball, like, ooh, big mansion or whatever the thing is you want, right? And you even say out loud, I'm excited, 3 times. And all of that fear that paralyzes, it polarizes, right? It goes to the other side and it becomes wind in your sails.
So in that process though, and you talk about this in your book, there's discomfort, and we talk about that with our clients. And we always say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. So talk a little bit about that discomfort, that it's okay, and kind of how to work through that as well.
Well, you said it very well, Roxanne. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Humans are hardwired to be comfortable. All right, we're designed to conserve energy, right? So being comfortable, it's like if you start running, say I'm going to run a mile at like 30 steps. You're like, okay, that's enough. So, and that's just your psychology and your physiology working against you. Remember what I said earlier? It's getting your psychology and your physiology to work for you instead of against you. So the trick there is to be okay with the discomfort, right? Growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone. Magic doesn't happen in your comfort zone. What I say is that, look, it's going to scare if it doesn't scare the hell out of you, you're not thinking big enough anyway.
We tell our clients that a lot. You should be scared. This is normal.
It's got to scare the shit out of you, right?
It's a big decision.
But look, humans, we are generally more comfortable in an awful reality that's familiar than we are in a beautiful reality that's unfamiliar. This is why lottery winners tank their lives. Most of them 10 years later, they're a mess, right? Because we got to stay in that comfort zone. So you got to learn, how do I transcend that to where the uncomfortable becomes comfortable, because that becomes your new baseline.
Yeah. And that's, that's why people will stay in relationships that aren't good for them. It's just
right.
that, once again, it's that comfort zone. And sometimes I equate that to the job you're on too. It's kind of like that bad relationship, but it's what you know.
And making a change can be, to go into something that you're unfamiliar with can be hard. So you just, if it's going to be hard either way, you stay with what you're doing that's hard versus going and trying something new that's hard.
You're right. They're hard in different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worse than hard. It's actually unconscious most of the time. I mean, 87% of people diagnosed with a lifestyle-related illness will not be able to make a change. People would rather die than change, right? That's the first part. The other thing is that you're going to make about 35,000 decisions today. 98% or something are going to be completely unconscious. This is why you're on the hamster wheel. This is why reality today is the same as it was yesterday and the same as it will be tomorrow. So when you bring conscious awareness to what was unconscious, you can start to make pivots.
Wow. Well, let's kind of pivot this a little bit. I mentioned this to you when we were prepping for this call. There's a lot of times where we work with spouses, and the other spouse is not involved in the process and could have some fear. And I always say that if you're going to take, $100,000 to $300,000 and invest it in something, that's something you really need to bring your spouse on board with. I mean, that's not just something you drop a bomb on them one day saying, hey, we're going to do this, right? So for people that have that spouse that might be a little bit unwilling, just kind of this whole subject, is there any advice you would have for somebody in that situation and why it's important to involve the spouse?
Yeah, if you're not willing to involve your spouse, then you need to understand what the problem really is, right? You have a trust problem, most likely, right? You don't trust this person, or you don't think they trust you, but something's going on in the relationship. Getting what you want, in my experience, especially doing it quickly, we talk about speed and getting what we want. It's a function of speed is thought of as a function of horsepower, but it's also a function of friction and weight. And so something like this, where you have a dynamic with people that won't talk to each other, or they're afraid, that creates friction, which is going to slow you down. There are ways. Not only can you get your own psychology and physiology to work for you instead of against you, you can get other people's psychology and physiology to work for you instead of against you, if you understand how this works and how to frame things, how to phrase things, how to create the reality that you're looking for. But ultimately, feelings drive actions. And always, that's just basic neuroscience. There's always a feeling that precedes any action you take, or if you choose not to take an action, there's a feeling associated with that. And so what is the feeling that is preventing somebody from having that conversation with their spouse? Because that's going to tell you a lot about what's going on in their head and in the relationship.
I think what I struggle with sometimes, and it's just an unfortunate scenario where the one spouse that wants to be the business owner has confidence in himself or herself and wants to move forward, but the spouse is the one with the fear and cannot overcome that fear and won't support it. So we've had situations where one person was ready to move forward or excited and had that confidence in themselves to do it. But the spouse, unfortunately, was too fearful. And when we tell them, if your spouse does not support you, we don't encourage you to move forward with this business. But then it's just, I guess, the question, we can't force the spouse to support them. And to your point, there's other underlying concerns or issues, but it just is kind of, it makes me sad that a client is held back from following through with their goals and expectations and hopes and dreams, basically, because of a fearful spouse that doesn't want to come on board and support them and encourage them. You don't need a discourager when you're starting business. You need a cheerleader. And if your spouse isn't willing to do that, then it's not the right time.
Yeah, you two open up quite the can of worms with this one, because there are a lot of rabbit holes I can go down. I tend to steer clear of relationship specific stuff, at least romantic partnership stuff, simply because I'm oriented towards abandoning those kinds of things. That's just my dysfunction, right? My history, my upbringing. So the abandonment of a relationship is, frighteningly easy for me. I will say this much: my framework is that you are the universe experiencing itself. Okay, you're not so much like, call it a soul, a human being that possesses a soul. You're a soul having a human experience, and there is something in the universe that wants to be experienced through you as you. And it's that heartfelt desire, it's that business that you really want to launch. Like, there's so much fire in there. Like, you can feel it in the core of your being. That is the universe wanting to bring something through you. And there's a bigger responsibility we have, again, in my framework, to that. It's bigger than us. It's bigger than our ego construct, because the things that we're talking about here are all ego construct stuff. And it's like, I have a bigger responsibility to the universe than my little ego as, Chris King. We have a new program right now at Status Flow that this is not me. It's not for me. It's not about me. It's coming through me. And it's for that. It's for everybody else that it's involved in and for whatever's trying to come through them. So I would say, to somebody in that experience, how bad do you want this? Like, how important is this? Is this, like, when I went after radio, and when I launched my company, it was a moral imperative. I will die rather than not have this. I'm going to have it, or I'm going to die trying, because you can die of something or you can die for something. That's the only way you can die.
So, Chris, we are going to encourage our clients that have belief systems that are trying to push them in the wrong direction from where the universe is trying to take them, to read your book. Once again, it's Renegotiate Your Existence, Unlock Your Impossible Life. It's an amazing book. Chris writes really well. I've got, I don't know if anyone can see it, but I've got pages folded down. I've got highlights. I've got underlines. It's available on Amazon. Really encourage. I think this book can help everybody, because we all have stuff that holds us back. So we appreciate you coming on today and visiting with us. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you or in touch with you, how would they do that?
Thank you so much for having me. Getting me to talk about this stuff is easy. Getting me to shut up is the trick. So you can go to statusflow.net. We're on Instagram at the Status Flow, or email me, chris@statusflow.net.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It has really been a pleasure visiting with you today and getting to know you. And I am looking forward to reading the book myself. Thank you all for joining us on episode 29 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. Again, I am Sara Waskow. It's Waskow, joined by my colleague Roxanne Rapske, Rapske. Please look us up on LinkedIn. We're very active there. We would love to connect. You can also download other podcasts wherever you get your podcast. And please find us and subscribe to our YouTube channel at FranNet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.